All right, testing, testing. How's that going? Let's see. All right, I am just going to sit here and get ready. Sit here and get ready. Oh, thank you, Curtis. Hold on a sec. All right. Why would it only be coming out of my left audio side? Hold on a second. Yeah, let's see. This is a known problem with OBS. Hang on. Thank you for helping me troubleshoot this, Curtis. Okay, 1 second. Be right back. Okay. How does this sound? Is that better? Anybody who is here? All right. I think I fixed it. Okay. Thank you for your patience, everybody. And bonjour. Welcome to another episode, installment, um, edition of Radical History. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about one of my very favorite historical events, historical occurrences, I suppose, which is the Beast of Gévaudan, which was a series of attacks that were carried out by some manner of mysterious beast in the south of France between 1764 and 1767. And of course, it is spooky season, so all the more reason to talk about horrifying and dramatic animal attacks. But also, this is one of my very favorite time periods as a historian because the what is sometimes called the long 18th century is a for me it's a really fascinating inflection point when the ancient and the modern sort of come together and mix in really interesting ways. It's also when you start to see the emergence of a lot of print and literacy. There's a whole lot of dramatic change. This is, of course, the era of revolution. And so I just can't get enough of talking about this. Now, my emphasis is usually on the Anglo American side of this, but I am extremely interested in, of course, all of the 18th century. And in France, there's a lot to talk about. You will see that I have chosen as the initial image for this talk a still from, or a promotional image from the extremely excellent 2001 French martial arts action film Brotherhood of the Wolf, which you should watch if you have a chance. It stars, among other people, Mark Dacascos and Monica Bellucci. And it's, honestly, it's kind of a dumb movie, but it's a lot of fun, and it covers this event and has some what I think are very interesting. It depicts a very interesting idea of what happened. So I'm a huge fan of it. Check it out. It's goofy. But without further ado, I am going to jump into this, and I'm going to talk about the Beast of Gévaudan. Suppose I should give a little disclaimer, which is I like to say French words, and I'm going to try to say them, but I may not say them very well. Also, there's quite a bit of violence in this particular talk, so if descriptions of mutilation, murder, animal attacks, that sort of thing are going to bother you, you should probably skip this one, and that's okay. So, here we go. So, at this time, in 1763, the French Empire is in a bit of a national slump. It has just come off of the 7 Years' War, which is known in the Americas as, or the American theater of which is known as the French and Indian War. And it would take much too long to go over everything that happens in the 7 Years' War, but suffice it to say, the French lose. They get their asses handed to them by Prussia and Britain and a whole coalition of nations, and they lose substantial territory in Europe and the Americas. They get their asses kicked by Daniel Day-Lewis and his friends, and they essentially cease to be a major player in North America and lose really take a dive on the European stage. This is kind of a consequence of what is often known as a diplomatic revolution, or a shift in diplomatic priorities. Various European nations overturned alliances or agreements that they'd had for sometimes centuries, and the balance of power began to shift pretty radically in Europe. This led to, of course, the 7 Years' War. Previously, it had something to do with the War of the Grand Alliance, and it would play a big part in the Napoleonic Wars. Essentially, you start to see what can be described as world wars occurring more often. As a consequence, for France especially, they lose territory and they lose national prestige, which is something that is increasingly important as mass media and especially nationalism come to be relevant and important to the ruling of, well, what will become nations. The king at the time is Louis XV, and Louis XV ruled for quite some time, one of the longest reigning French monarchs. He however, was not Louis XIV. He was no Sun King. And though he did oversee some growth and some success for France, by the later years of his reign, France is definitely waning in power and influence compared to especially Britain, but also Prussia and even Austria in this time period. And most historians, looking back, tend to be critical of this reign. There's a calcification. This is the waning days of the Ancien Regime, and of course, the France that Louis XV will leave to his grandson Louis XVI is the France that will carry out the revolution. A France that is completely incapable of dealing with the problems that its people need help with, completely incapable of competing on the international stage, and really just a waning power as these things go. So bear that in mind as we go into this conversation about the Beast of Gévaudan. So this takes place in the the locality of Gévaudan, which is in what is now Lozère. You can see that in this map in the sort of lavender region called Occitane. And this is important for a number of reasons. Occitane is, as you can see, it's at the south of France. And in a lot of ways, it has more to do with, or it has kind of its own cultural, ethnic, national character, and it has its own language. Occitan was and is its own language, a sort of collection of languages. It's a Romance language, or belongs to a family of Romance languages, which includes Languedoc and Gascon and a number of others. It's closely related to Catalan, and up until the revolution, and this is a whole nother conversation, but for a long time, the people of Occitan and a lot of these southern French, a lot of parts of France, don't really have a French identity. They probably would not have considered themselves French. They would not have spoken, or many of them would not have spoken what we now recognize as French. And they, their relationship to the crown, to the state, to the king was uncertain at best. So when we talk about, especially sort of pre-revolution France, the idea of the nation is, or a nation or a French identity is not super accurate. So bear that in mind. It was not that these people didn't recognize the authority of the king, but they probably had a loose relationship to the crown and really to the state at all. That also has to do with the fact that this area is remote, it's mountainous, it is relatively difficult to get to and difficult to navigate, and it's very sparsely populated. It's still one of the most sparsely populated regions in France, and it didn't help that in the 16th century, a large number of Huguenots settled here and then were driven out. A lot of the wealth of the nobility and of the people of Occitan and of Lozère especially, and of Gévaudan, was either forcibly or expropriated or fled with the rest of the Huguenots. So this is not a deeply impoverished part of France, but it's remote. It's mostly peasants, and it's not especially prosperous. Most of the economy here revolves around textiles, wool, sheep herding. And even though textiles is becoming less and less important and less valuable, but it is sort of the crucial element of the economy for the people of Gévaudan, and that's important for what is about to happen, which is that in June 1764, excuse me just a moment, Sorry. In June of 1764, June 30th of 1764, a 14-year-old shepherdess, Jean Boulet, who was tending a flock of sheep, was attacked by a creature, some manner of beast, and killed while she was, again, tending this flock of sheep. She was not actually the creature's first victim. 2 months prior, a young woman tending cattle was attacked by a creature like a wolf, yet not a wolf, according to her, but escaped because her flock, her herd, defended her. The bulls charged the beast and scared it off. Throughout this period, and this is going to be relevant later, the wolf does not seem, or the beast, as it were, does not seem to be concerned with humans, or not terribly afraid of them, but is somewhat wary around cattle. This is the first of what will become many attacks, and it is hard to know exactly how many people are attacked and killed during this time period, but estimates range from dozens to several hundred. And in this first period, the 1764, when these attacks just beginning, it is dozens. And attacks continue, and terror sort of comes to grip the people of Gévaudan. One of the things that is particularly terrifying and gruesome about the wolf is that reportedly, all of these, not the wolf, the beast, it is called La Bête Féroce, the ferocious beast or something like that. The beast is that it tends to target the victim's head and neck, and many of the victims were found partially or fully decapitated. So, ordinarily, this might have passed without notice, or it might not have caught on the way that it did, but there were a number of things that made this attack, these series of attacks, sort of grip the French imagination, and a lot of it has to do with sort of the, I guess, tightening of bonds and the enclosure of just both physical and mental spaces, but it also has to do with the media, or the growing media and the growing network of communication that is available in the early modern period. It's also occurring at a time when there's a lot of anxiety about the Enlightenment and about witchcraft and about changing ideas of modernity and what the world means, what is there and what is not there, what is true and what is not. And I guess what I'm getting at here, what I'm trying to say, is that this makes people a little crazy. The Bishop of Mende, a town nearby, gives a barn burner of a speech in which he says, "A ferocious beast, unknown in our latitudes, appears all of a sudden as if miraculously, without anyone knowing from whence it came. It is because you have offended God." And this is a pretty common sentiment, not just among bishops, but among everyone, that there is something unholy, there is something evil, there is something satanic about the beast. Werewolves in folklore are often associated with both witchcraft and Satan and demons. And so there is very quickly, both among the peasantry, but also among the otherwise rational folk of the more urban cosmopole, a concern about the, terrifying nature of this beast. And one of the sort of vehicles for this terror is our newspapers, especially the Courrier d'Avignon, which was created by François Morenas, and which sort of pioneered a new type of reporting, which was called faits divers. These were stories of everyday incidents in small villages. They're a lot like they're a lot like true crime, basically. They're, honestly, this sort of thing would not be at all remarkable to you and I, who spend a lot of time exposed to modern media, where sensational stories about horrific murders are just sort of our bread and butter. You turn on any local news channel or go to any major news website and you will read sensational stories about this attack or whatever. But at the time, this was a relatively new invention, and the people fucking ate it up. People loved this shit. And when I say people, I don't just mean, obviously, actually, the peasants didn't care at all because many of them were illiterate, but the growing bourgeoisie of the towns and cities, especially Avignon, but all the way out to Paris and beyond, were absolutely riveted by these sort of, again, true crime tales of grisly murders by a bête féroce. And this spread not just to France, but beyond. Frederick of Prussia followed this story from Brandenburg. It was something that Voltaire was particularly interested in. It was a sensational story all over Europe. People were following this with fascination and horror, and titillation, perhaps. Now, here's an example of the kind of reporting that you could expect to hear about the bête féroce. A ferocious beast of unknown type coming from who knows where attacks the human species, killing individuals, drinking their blood, feasting on their flesh, and multiplying its carnage from day to day. Hunters who are in pursuit have never been able to stop it because it is more agile than they, nor lure it into traps because it surpasses them in cunning, nor engage it in combat when it presents itself to them because its terrifying appearance weakens their courage, disturbs their vision, sets their hands shaking, and neutralizes their skill. To just give an idea of the sort of dispassionate reporting that you might expect to hear about the bête féroce. So these attacks continue throughout 1764, and ultimately the king realizes that he needs to do something about this, so he dispatches Captain Jean-Baptiste Duhamel and 57 dragoons, who were sent, by the king. And by all accounts, Duhamel and his contingent of dragoons? Dragoons really fucked it up. The soldiers, on at least one occasion, claimed to have seen the beast and shot at it, but failed to kill it. In some tellings, they just missed. But one given by the men themselves claims that they repeatedly shot the beast and it got up, or the bullets bounced off of its thick hide, or it simply shrugged off their bullets. I personally think that they were embarrassed and lied because they couldn't hit the broadside of the bard with their smoothbore muskets, but that is pure speculation. And anyway, that's what they said happened. Embarrassed by this particular failure, Louis XV enlisted the help of, and this is a real doozy of a name, so bear with me, Jean-Charles Marc-Antoine Vaumelles de Henneval and his son Jean-Francois. I will refer to them as the de Hennevals from here on out. They were renowned wolf hunters who brought with them several bloodhounds trained in hunting wolves. The de Hennevals had made their sort of fortune and their names hunting wolves in Normandy, where they had reportedly destroyed up to 1,200 wolves. Throughout 1765, when they arrived to replace Duhamel, these men killed dozens of wolves. But on May 24th, there was a popular fair at Malzieu, and the beast made an attack during the day at a place called Joulangier, which ended up killing the 20-year-old Marguerite Martin, and then was followed by several more attacks throughout the day. The de Hennevals were embarrassed by this, and the king had them replaced as well by a man named Francois Antoine. Now, Francois Antoine was, and again, this is a whole list of names, the officer of the Royal Bedchamber, Knight Equerry of the Royal Military Order of St. Louis, and the Harquebusier, the gun bearer of the king, and lieutenant of the hunt, which is a lot of titles. He was essentially the king's lead huntsman. I learned while doing research for this that there is actually a wolf catcher royal, a lieutenant de louveterie, whose job was simply to hunt wolves. But for some reason, he was not given this job, and I cannot figure out why. I imagine there's a really fascinating story behind that, but I don't know what it is. So apologies, and we will just have to wonder together. So Antoine, the Harquebusier of the king, was sent to Gévaudan to put this beast down once and for all. Antoine did a number of things differently. He enlisted a large proportion of the peasantry, setting them to sort of just flush out the wolves, beat the underbrush, make a bunch of noise, trying to flush the beast out. He was there for a while and hunted several wolves, but on the 11th of August, a young woman named Marie-Jeanne Vallée and her younger sister were attacked while fording a river. Vallée successfully defended herself and her sister with a bayonet mounted at the end of a staff, wounding the beast, which threw itself into the river and, according to the account, thrashed about madly before escaping. I could not find any information about why Vallée had a bayonet, but everything I read seemed to think that was normal, so just I don't know, maybe shepherdesses were carrying around bayonets regularly. That would be a smart thing to do if you're being attacked by beasts. So anyway, good for her. Antoine and his company quickly made their way to the site when they heard of this event and praised Marie-Jeanne for her bravery. Antoine gave her the name the Maid of Gévaudan, comparing her to Joan of Arc. There is a very cool statue of her fending off the wolf with a spear, which I somehow failed to include in my slideshow, but I think it'll be the thumbnail for this. Unfortunately, as exciting as that was, it appears that the beast survived because attacks began again in early September, resulting in 4 injuries and 2 additional deaths. And I don't know what my next thing is. Oops. Let's stay on this. So, on the 19th of September, a huntsman told Antoine that a large wolf had been sighted in Saint-Julien-de-Chazé and that a she-wolf and her whelps were nearby. Antoine and his party moved in, and on the 21st of September, he encountered a wolf as it emerged from the forest. His musket was reportedly loaded with 5 charges of powder, a ball, and 30 to 40 pieces of shrapnel known as wolf shot. He fired from 50 yards away and was nearly knocked to the ground. The wolf collapsed after having taken the musket ball to the right eye and shot to the right shoulder and side. Le Loup de Chazé, as it was afterwards known, was 6 feet long, slightly over 3 feet tall, and weighed around 140 pounds. Antoine was anxious to confirm without a doubt that the dead animal before him was the beast, so it was taken to Bessay, where an autopsy was performed by the surgeon Boulanger. No human remains were uncovered in its stomach or intestines, but a number of individuals who had been attacked by the beast came forward and identified this wolf as their assailant, including the Maid of Gévaudan, Marie-Jeanne Vallée. Antoine had the animal embalmed, and the carcass was presented before Louis XV himself. As recognition and as a reward for this feat, Antoine was rewarded with 9,000 livres and numerous accolades. But would you believe that this was not the end of it, and attacks did not cease? In December, 2 boys were attacked but survived. And then soon afterwards, successful attacks followed, and shepherds witnessed that the beast no longer showed any fear around cattle. A dozen more deaths were reported to have followed on attacks near La Besserie Saint-Marie. Ultimately, the person who is credited with killing the creature that ended the attacks is a man named Jean Chastel, a local hunter who shot it at the slopes of Mount Mouchet during a hunt organized by a local nobleman, the Marquis de Apchier. I don't know that one. In 1767. There are a bunch of really delightful legends about this event, including some that say that Chastel killed the beast after reciting prayers, or that he used silver bullets, or that he melted down Virgin Mary's medals to make his shot. These are probably all later inventions, but after the death of this final beast, the attacks appear to have slowed down or even stopped entirely. So, what happened here? You may be wondering, right? There's several animals killed. There's dozens, hundreds of attacks. There's repeated descriptions of something called a wolf that is not a wolf. It's described as wolf-like, but not, but bigger. Sometimes it's as large as a cow or a horse. Sometimes it's got an elongated head or snout, pointed ears, a mouth that's not like a wolf. Sometimes it's said to be standing up or have a tawny or a russet color fur. Sometimes it's described as having glowing red eyes, etc., 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 right? So what happened here? What was the beast? Who was the culprit? Well, I hope that you're not coming to me hoping to get a final answer, because if so, you're not going to get one. But I can tell you what some people have identified, and what some historians that I respect have said about this particular event. So the, I guess, traditional reading of the Beast of Gévaudan, of this overall time period, is that a bunch of illiterate and superstitious peasants, got in their heads about a bunch of wolf attacks and invented a savage beast to explain what had happened. But recent scholarship has shown that it was really a combination of both the peasants, but also the people of the cosmopole, the urban bourgeoisie, who were fascinated by this particular event, and that there was a fascination with it that was driven both by sort of an interest and a even obsession with new, I guess, naturalist understandings of the world, growing understanding of different animals and different types of creatures that occurred elsewhere, as explorers brought back specimens from the far corners of the earth, and that there was both something very unique and something familiar about this. The truth is that wolf attacks in this time period are pretty common. That some historians have speculated that in the 1600s and the 1700s that there were thousands of fatal wolf attacks, perhaps 10,000, up to 100 a year at times. And this, if like me, you're American, or you grew up in the American West, this seems absolutely shocking to you, because our wolves stay very far away from humans and are actually not usually dangerous to human beings. But what's happening in the early modern period in Europe is that the population is expanding and the wild areas are growing more and more condensed. And this is a period of extreme interaction between wild species and human beings. I don't know how many people know this, but the last wild cow, the last aurochs, was killed in Poland about 100 years before this event. And that's not to say that anything specific might have happened here, but it is actually not uncommon for wolves to encounter and attack humans in this time period. And so this is a particularly intense and dramatic example of wolf attacks, but it is not entirely outside of the realm of understanding. That being said, there is definitely something going on here. And I have collected for you a number of... Well, I have read a bunch of different theories about what the Beast of Gévaudan might have been. I am also still sad about that aurochs, by the way. Rest in peace to the aurochs. I have collected a bunch of theories about the Gévaudan or the Beast of Gévaudan and what it might have been, and then I will tell you what I think it was at the end. So, starting from least likely going to most likely, of course, it might have been a loup-garou, a werewolf, of course. This was a extremely common explanation for what happened. This was very popular among both the clergy and the peasants as an explanation for why this creature was killing people and ripping their heads off and doing all sorts of horrible, dramatic things. This is a history talk, so I can't really endorse the it's a werewolf theory, but it's a fun one and one of my favorites. Some other really exciting ones include people who think that it might have been some sort of prehistoric canid that survived somehow until the modern day. Particular theories include a hyenodon, which you can see here, a big, scary hyena creature, or a hemicyon, which is a kind of bear dog. This is a very fun idea in my estimation, but completely and absolutely preposterous. There's not really anything in the history or the fossil record to suggest that even a small population of these creatures might have survived to the modern day, but it's a delightful theory, I think. Other theories include that it's a escaped specimen from somebody's sort of like personal menagerie, a hyena or a lion. Spoilers for Brotherhood of the Wolf, but this is what the movie postulates that it is. That it's a trained lion that has been armored and directed to attack by a evil. Actually, it's too complicated to go in here. You should really watch the movie. It's great. There's also theories that it might be some kind of wolf hybrid. One historian suggested that it might have been a mastiff trained and clad in armor. Hold on a sec. I'm not any more qualified than anybody else to speculate on this, and a lot of people smarter and more educated than I have made very, very good educated guesses. But you're watching my stream, so I'm going to tell you what I think anyway. So I have a couple of theories. So the very boring, obvious one is that this was not one animal, but it was a series of attacks by a pack of wolves or several packs of wolves that were growing sort of that were just put into contact with human beings and were under stress environmental and social, and responded by attacking people. Um, that's unsatisfying and doesn't seem to explain everything that happened, especially the the predilection for attacking heads and necks and decapitating people. And so there's a part of me, and this is, I'm not the first person to suggest this, but I wonder, and I suspect that maybe there is a human element involved here. That other people have suggested a serial killer is involved in this, but there are so many eyewitnesses that see a beast of some sort, a bête féroce. And so I wonder if indeed it is some sort of combination of a trained animal or a person working in concert with wolves, or some sort of trained wolf dog thing, and that, or God, even something more gruesome, somebody's going in after these wolves and chopping off heads or something like that. But I have to believe that, given the scale and given the types of attacks, that there is some sort of human element involved here, because every time something really horrible happens in history, you can be pretty sure that mankind has something to do with it. So I promised you all that I would speculate and reveal the true identity of the beast, and that was a lie, obviously, but that's my take on it. Is that's my wild speculation about what happened here. But part of what I think is so interesting about this time period, or about this event, is that we do not know, which is really rare and really interesting. And I also think that this is just such an interesting intersection, because you can kind of see intersection of time. You can see the sort of like fading desperation of the ancien regime and the, I guess, impotence of the old order. There was a great need for some sort of national victory at this point in time, on the heels of the defeat in the 7 Years' War. And so Duhamel and Antoine and all of these aging soldiers go, and they're trying to kill this great beast so they can get a victory, so they can bring something home to the king and restore the national honor. And then, embarrassingly, they fail again and again and again. And it's, kind of a very on the nose, I guess, metaphor for what's happening in France, and a foreshadowing of the revolution to come. And it's also, again, a very unsubtle metaphor for the, the disappearing of wild spaces, and the, expansion of civilization to encompass all within its borders. The enclosure of the commons, the creation of national boundaries, the elimination of the mysterious and the superstitious, right? The subjugation of witchcraft and magic and folk knowledge to rationality and science. I think it's just like a very, very interesting. I think it's a great stand-in for a lot of what's happening in this time period, and that's why it's so fascinating. So that, my friends, mon amis, is the Beast of Gévaudan. I apologize for leaving you with more questions than answers, but now you can join the ranks of historians and naturalists throughout history in not knowing and wondering about the Beast of Gévaudan. Thank you all for tuning in to my very first YouTube stream. I think this went pretty well. I will be back next week with a talk on witches and witchcraft, which I'm very excited about, and it will follow the a talk I gave a while ago in person, and I'm very excited about it. Please smash that like button, share, follow me on Twitter, Substack, follow, whatever. And thanks again for listening. I will see you all next